Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 25. Death G. Part 1. The dagger and internal energy are yours. Guard Gam's eyes trembled at Mok Jaeongun's words. The dagger embedded in the center of his chest. The internal energy contained within the dagger was his own? Then, did this fellow forcibly take his internal energy and utilize it? Impossible. Internal energy has its own unique properties. Even if one takes another's internal energy, transformed by various schools and sects, it would practically be poison. Even if internal energy is passed down between master and disciple of the same sect, there is no way to directly utilize it without refining it into one's own through breathing techniques. Yet, he used it? Just what is this bastard's true identity? He was definitely not an ordinary civilian. Guard Gam thought he could control him since he was a death row inmate and not a martial artist. However, that was a miscalculation. This fellow possessed strange abilities that he was unaware of. He even manipulated the bizarre. A mistake. It was wrong to bring this fellow here. How foolish to think he could be controlled since he hadn't learned martial arts. The truly frightening aspect of this fellow might be that very point. Using the bizarre to draw his gaze, then throwing a dagger imbued with absorbed internal energy to inflict a fatal wound, he possessed an extraordinary mind capable of such feats. Hugh. Guard Gam barely caught his breath. It was difficult to breathe with the dagger stuck in his chest. His body temperature was dropping, centered around his chest. The location was too critical. The moment he pulled it out, the bleeding might worsen, making it difficult to survive. SSK. Guard Gam raised his head and glared at Mok Jaeongun. In any case, he and this fellow could never go together. They had to settle this somehow. Although he was in the same situation, with daggers stuck between his ribs and thigh, moving would be just as difficult for the fellow. Guard Gam furrowed his brows. The dagger the fellow had thrown was the one that had been stuck in his own thigh. However, why was the bleeding so minimal? In that location, not only the thigh area but also the pants below should have been soaked with blood by now. Yet, aside from that area, it seemed like blood wasn't flowing. There's no way he controlled the bleeding or acupoints. He had never seen such a sight before. Then, what was it? Guard Gam, who had been staring at Mok Jaeongun as if looking at a monster, bit his lip. He had no idea how he ended up making an enemy out of such a bizarre fellow. However, he still had a secret weapon. Hadn't he refrained from administering it for this very moment? You forgot about the poison pill. That was none other than the poison pill. He had fed him the poison pill in advance to prevent him from acting on his own or trying to escape if he broke free from control. At Guard Gam's words, Mok Jaeongun parted his lips. Ah? The poison pill? That's right. I had forgotten about it. Huh. Guard Gam was dumbfounded by Mok Jaeongun's words. How could he forget that his life was at stake? Regardless of what he was thinking, it didn't matter. That cunning fellow couldn't have forgotten about it. Huh. Let's make a deal. A deal? Stop fighting like this and just hand over the secret manual. Then, I'll let you go. Let me go? Isn't that what you wanted? Staying here is just a fake life anyway, and you'll have to bear the risk of being exposed at any moment. Mok Jaeongun nodded at these words. Well, that's true. So, I'll give you the method to create the antidote and some money. Any decent physician should be able to make it, and with the money, you can start anew. Cough. As his speech grew longer, Guard Gam's voice became hoarse. If he didn't receive emergency treatment and perform breathing exercises soon, it would become dangerous. There was a limit to enduring with internal energy. Choose. Fighting like this will only harm both of us anyway. There's definitely some truth to that. Mok Jaeongun showed a positive response. Seeing Mok Jaeongun's reaction, Guard Gam tried to let out a sigh of relief. After putting out the urgent fire, it wouldn't be too late to eliminate him later. For now, he had to reassure the fellow. I'll give you the tranquilizer first. Each of us will get treatment. Cough. At that moment, Guard Gam coughed. It was a cough mixed with blood. Since he was injured, it could happen, but here, Guard Gam felt a sense of discomfort. The blood. There was a foul smell coming from the blood. Startled, Guard Gam tried to open his chest. However, his hands trembled severely, unable to move. Why are my hands? Thud. That wasn't the end of it. Soon, Guard Gam's legs lost strength, and he fell to one knee on the ground. Then, Bleg. Guard Gam vomited a handful of black blood. He had been trying to protect his chest and organs with internal energy, but something was rapidly spreading to his internal organs, causing damage. Could it be? Guard Gam's eyes widened. These symptoms were undoubtedly poison. Something was strange. This fellow didn't use poison, so why was he poisoned? As he was puzzled, Mok Jayangan staggered and slowly approached him, who was suffering. Phew. Having this dagger stuck here is quite painful. You. What did you do? Ah, I forgot to mention something earlier. What? I also gave you my blood, in addition to the dagger and internal energy. Blood? Yes. There wasn't enough time to wipe the blood off the dagger that was stuck in my thigh and give it to you. Although it was intentional. What the hell are you talking about? Mok Jayangan chuckled and said to the confused Guard Gam. Of course, you wouldn't understand. I only told Guard Go-chan about it. Go-chan? Yes. It's nothing special. It's just that since I ate a lot of poisonous herbs from a young age, my blood has toxic properties. Guard Gam was dumbfounded by these words. Toxic blood? What kind of nonsense is this? Then, is this fellow saying he's like a poison bringer of the Sichuan Tang clan? This bastard, just... Huh. It was absurd. Just how much has this bastard been hiding? However, that wasn't the important thing. He had to somehow use his internal energy to block the poison from spreading, not just around his chest. He didn't know what kind of poison it was, but it was so fierce that it felt burning. Cough, cough. It's painful, isn't it? You think you'll be safe? Rush oil, beetle nut, monk's hood, greed dragon. Guard Gam's eyes shook wildly at the medicinal herbs coming out of Mok Jayan Yuan's mouth. They were all ingredients used in the poison pill. Pokeweed, fly mushroom, love parsley. You. How? Well, I can roughly tell what they are just by lightly touching them with my tongue, can't I? He can tell by tasting them? Just what is this bastard's true identity? Mok Jayangan approached the dumbfounded Guard Gam, bent his knees, and met his gaze, saying, Actually, I don't need an antidote or anything. You deceived me. Cough, cough. To play with me? In response to that question, Mok Jayangan tilted his head slightly and stared intently at Guard Gam's face. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with fear and terror. Seeing his appearance, Mok Jayangan smiled and said, Whether they are martial artists or top-tier masters, they are not much different from other people in the face of pain and death. Creepy. The moment he heard those words, Guard Gam felt chills running down his spine. How could someone wearing a human skin say such things and have such dead eyes? It didn't feel like he was facing a human being at all. This fellow was a demon. Tremble, tremble, tremble. Guard Gam couldn't stop trembling. His breathing became rough, and it became difficult to breathe due to fear. The human heart was indeed cunning. Just a moment ago, he still thought he had the upper hand over his opponent, so he looked down on him without any tension. However, now it was completely different. You're trembling. Spare my life. Guard Gam threw away his pride and begged for his life. He couldn't die like this. He had dreamed of a stable life after leaving that cruel world of assassins where he could die at any moment. However, losing his life like this was too unfair. Mok Jae-eun stroked his own chin. "Spare your life, you say?" "I swear. I swear loyalty." "No. I will swear loyalty. Please. Please spare my life." Seeing him pleading, Mok Jae-eun smiled and said, "Now, your attitude is to my liking. Oh, I will live only for you, young master. Then, I would be grateful." At Mok Jae-eun's words, Guard Gam's expression was about to brighten. However, stab. Kuark. Just when he thought he was going to spare his life, Mok Jae-eun pressed the dagger stuck in his chest so hard that even the hilt was embedded. Mok Jae-eun whispered into the ear of the suffering Guard Gam. "Someone who easily switches sides according to their needs, what kind of loyalty are you talking about?" "Ugh. It seems it would be more helpful if you just die. SSK. Yua." With those words, he covered the mouth and nose of the gasping Guard Gam with his hand. Guard Gam, with bloodshot eyes, flailed his arms and legs in agony, but Mok Jae-eun watched him with an expressionless face. It didn't last long. The twitching of his whole body soon ceased. Guard Gam, who had taken his last breath with bloodshot eyes filled with terror. Mok Jae-eun stared at him as if he had lost interest, then removed his palm that had been covering his nose and mouth. "I handled it faster than I thought. Am I lucky?" From the beginning, he had planned to kill Guard Gam one way or another. There was no point in keeping someone alive who knew he was a fake, as it would only become bothersome. Mok Jae-eun was contemplating. Should I kill Guard Go-chan too? If he got rid of Guard Go-chan as well, there would be no one left who knew the truth. However, Mok Jae-eun soon shook his head. "Nah, I'll let him live. Go-chan was still useful. It was convenient to have him handle various aftermath tasks. Moreover, he seems to be quite tight-lipped too." He was impressed by the fact that he kept his mouth shut until the end, even under torture. Mok Jae-eun didn't care whether it was out of fear or because of the poison. As long as he didn't backstab him, he was willing to make use of him as much as possible. Sting. Mok Jae-eun looked at the dagger stuck between his ribs. No matter how extraordinarily strong his recovery ability was, it was still painful to have this stuck in him. However, he couldn't pull it out now. He had to maintain a plausible appearance. "I wish someone would come quickly. It was cumbersome." Ah. He almost forgot. Mok Jae-eun placed his palm on the Danjian area of the dead Guard Gam. Then, he activated the ritual of binding. It was to confirm one thing. The internal energy dispersing from the dead man's Danjian was sucked into Mok Jae-eun's body through the ritual of binding. It was incomparable to the amount from Zhou Il-sang. A pipe dream. However, this was internal energy that would have dissipated and disappeared anyway. What he was curious about was something else. It didn't take long for the influx of internal energy to stop. The reaction he had been expecting didn't occur. Is it not? Just as he thought that. At that moment, a chilling and ominous energy of death flowed in from Guard Gam's abdominal area. It was clearly similar to the energy he had absorbed from Zhou Il-sang. No, the quantity was even greater. Ah! There it was. The energy of death from the dead Guard Gam's body gathered below his navel in the abdominal area. And it gradually took shape. Although he didn't know exactly what it was, Mok Jae-eun was increasingly fond of this chilling energy. Phew. A pair of red eyes watched Mok Jae-eun with interest, as if he was fascinating. It was Chong Ryong, holding a long pipe in her mouth amidst the thick smoke. Chong Ryong whispered softly to demonic monk beside her. "Rebel monk. I think I know why you are swayed by that mortal. That fellow was not an ordinary human being." She, too, could instinctively sense it. Chapter 26. Death G. Part 2. This was Mok Eun-pyong's residence. Slurp. Makun Pyong, who had finished his breakfast, was elegantly sipping silver needles of the June Mountain, a famous tea from Hunan province. A guard named Zhanyang Pyong, who had reached the level of a first-rate master, carefully spoke to him. "Young master. What is it?" But judging from Guard Gam's reaction earlier, it didn't seem like a lie. "Do you really think he was deceiving you as a last resort?" "Tak." Makun Pyong put down his teacup and answered briefly. "No. It's half and half." Guard Gam must have had something he didn't know about either. Even if it was a last resort, would he do something that would raise suspicion in just a day? No matter how much of a fool Mok Jiangan is, he must have hidden at least one secret weapon. What? Then how? Didn't they say I would only give him 2 hours and take his life if he couldn't find Zhou Il Sang? Yes. Didn't you want Guard Gam that much? Makun Pyong had always wanted to make Mok Jiangan's Guard Gam his own. Even after learning that he was a former assassin, his determination remained unchanged. Rather, he remarked that he would be even more useful. "If you had investigated separately and shown trust, that's not possible." "What do you mean it's not possible?" "If I had shown unconditional trust, he would have seen me as a pushover or a fool rather than being grateful. So, it was to instill an appropriate level of tension." "What do you mean? Do you think I would easily abandon such a talented individual?" Makun Pyong grinned. Even if it took more than 2 hours, he had no intention of actually killing him. "I should show forgiveness after demonstrating how strict and stern I am, once the truth is revealed. People are naturally more affected when you treat them harshly and then show kindness once." That was Makun Pyong's way of dealing with people. To this, Guard Zhanyang Pyong inwardly disagreed but pretended to be impressed and said, "As expected of you, young master. I didn't know you had such insight. So, just wait quietly. It's good to crush someone's heart when they become impatient. Even if it's just out of responsibility for losing Guard Zhou, he will be more loyal." "You are absolutely right." "Flattery. But please don't push him too hard." At these words, Makun Pyong raised one eyebrow. "What? Didn't you find out while investigating Guard Gam's past?" Are you talking about that?" "Yes. Guard Gam might be from that place. If he's really from that place, no matter if he's retired, if you stimulate him carelessly, it might be dang. No, it might become tiresome for you." He was about to say it could be dangerous but changed his words. It was because Makun Pyong had quite a strong pride. That was how dangerous it was to have someone from an assassin group as a subordinate. Especially if they were from that place. Slurp. Tak. You said he might be. We don't know for sure whether he is or not. Yes. Rather than that, think about what to do with that bastard Mok Jiangan. If he really touched Zhou Il Sang, we absolutely cannot leave him alone. Judging from his reaction, he seemed to be already upset. Continuing the same conversation here would only make his lord uncomfortable, so Guard Zhanyang Pyong stopped. It was then. The sound of someone running in a hurry was heard. "Knock knock." "Young master." "It's Han Sang." "Come in." Han Sang. He was one of Makun Pyong's 3 guards and had the lowest martial arts skill. Like Go Chan, he was only at the second-rate level. That was why he was in charge of most of the miscellaneous tasks. Makun Pyong asked Han Sang, who was rushing in, with a puzzled expression. "It hasn't been long since I sent you to assess the situation, but judging from your expression and how urgently you came, something must have happened." That's, speak. Guard Gam has disappeared." "What?" At the sudden news, Makun Pyong's expression hardened. What kind of nonsense was this? Guard Zhanyang Pyong asked in an incredulous voice. "What do you mean? Guard Gam disappeared?" That's... Don't tell me he disobeyed the young master's order and ran away? That's not it. Then what the hell are you talking about? Speak clearly. Pressed by Zhanyang Pyong, Guard Han Sang spoke with a troubled expression. There's a commotion right now. A commotion? Yes. The outer hall warriors are guarding, so I couldn't get close, but I heard that guard Gam killed 3 workers in the medical hall and tried to kill the 3rd young master, but escaped after being injured. At those words, Makun Pyong was dumbfounded. What the hell was this about? He had told him to find his missing guard Jo Il Sang, so why would guard Gam suddenly try to kill that bastard Mok Jaehyun? Could it be? Was he trying to prove his loyalty by doing that? Or did he try to threaten Mok Jaehyun to find out where Jo Il Sang had disappeared to? It was difficult to guess. Then, guard John Yang Pyong asked in an equally absurd tone. Are you sure? Why would guard Gam do such a thing? I'm not sure either. But judging from the fact that Mok Jaehyun's injury was serious enough to be life-threatening, it might be true. However, that's not the problem. If that's not it, then what is? I'm sorry to say this, but, speak quickly. At Makun Pyong's urging, guard Han Sang finally parted his lips. It seems that Mok Jaehyun testified to the outer hall's investigation that you, young master, instigated guard Gam to betray him and kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, Makun Pyong's face contorted terribly. Seeing his anger, guard John Yang Pyong hurriedly tried to appease him. Young master. Please calm down. Even if that bastard Mok Jaehyun spreads such rumors, the outer hall won't believe it. Bang! At those words, Makun Pyong slammed the table and raised his voice. Believing it or not is not the issue. If I get involved in rumors without even being selected as the successor, how will the retainers view me? Makun Pyong's body trembled. The outer hall wouldn't be able to pressure him over this incident since he wasn't even the clan leader, but they wouldn't overlook it either. If that happened, the support of the retainers might weaken as well. That bastard Mok Jaehyun. Whoosh! Unable to hold back any longer, Makun Pyong shot up from his seat. He couldn't bear it unless he went to Mok Jaehyun right away and confronted him. Guard John Yang Pyong tried to dissuade him. Young master, please calm down. Calm down? Do I look like I can calm down right now? That damn bastard backstabbed me twice, and you want me to let it slide? This was the second time, following the incident with guard Jo Il Sang. Especially this time, it really pissed him off. But if you go now, it will only raise more suspicion. Moreover, if the outer hall is guarding him, the eyes of the retainers will inevitably be drawn to you. Grind. At those words, Makun Pyong gritted his teeth. Although he was angry, guard John Yang Pyong was right about this. If he went to Mok Jaehyun and vented his anger or harmed him, it would negatively impact the succession competition. However, just leaving him alone was also infuriating. How triumphant would that bastard be? The eldest young master Mok Yong Ho and the lady of the house might even mock him. Seeing Makun Pyong unable to suppress his anger, guard John Yang Pyong spoke in a low voice. Young master. Since it has come to this, how about mobilizing them? Them? I mean the group that guard Gam belonged to. Are you talking about that place? Yes. What do you mean by mobilizing them? As far as I know, they have a strong pride and an iron rule regarding assassinations. An iron rule? Yes. Regardless of whether they have retired or not, they do not tolerate failure from an assassin of their own faction. What do they do if they don't tolerate it? They said they complete the assassination by any means necessary. At those words, Makun Pyong's hardened expression softened. Didn't he say with his own mouth that guard Gam tried to kill him? Then, it's rather fortunate. We will leak this information to them. At guard John Yang Pyong's words, the corners of Makun Pyong's mouth curled up. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Mok Jaehyun was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, as if meditating. He was currently trying a technique called breathing techniques. No matter how strong his recovery ability was, it was impossible for the wounds from the dagger stuck between his ribs and thigh to heal instantly. Since it had come to this, he wanted to challenge himself to form a Danjian. That way, I might be able to do something with this. Below Mok Jayangan's navel, there was a chilling and ominous energy of death gathered. It was the energy absorbed from the dead Zhou Ayelsang and Guard Gam. However, despite absorbing it, unlike the internal energy he had absorbed through the ritual of binding, it just accumulated in his stomach without moving. So, he thought that if he could form a Danjian with this, it might be possible. But is this how it's supposed to be? The ignited wood heart transformation technique had a detailed description of the breathing method. Of course, there were also methods for qi circulation and key points. Anyway, to perform proper qi circulation, one had to accept the energy from the air through breathing and gather it near the Danjian to form a small seed. However, something felt strange. Why is the energy I'm taking in through breathing dispersing? The energy gathered through breathing was very subtle. It was much smaller than when he absorbed it through the ritual of binding, but according to the secret manual, this was normal. So, thinking of it as collecting bits and pieces to form a mountain, he guided it below his navel. Swish! However, as soon as it entered, it dispersed. It just disappeared, as if the internal energy he had absorbed through the ritual of binding naturally dispersed. Why? He couldn't understand. Was it normal for energy to disperse easily? With no one to ask and only being able to follow what was written in the book, Mok Jayangan had no choice but to adhere to the instructions. Phew! Phew! He gathered energy while reciting the key points of the method through breathing techniques. He did this for half a day, almost until the day was about to end, but the subtle energy he gathered still dispersed as soon as it reached below his navel. What is it? Why was that? The secret manual stated that forming a seed, no, a Danjian, was extremely difficult. From that perspective, it was indeed difficult. However, there was no mention of it dispersing as soon as it was gathered. It said it would gradually disperse. It disappears immediately. But unlike the book, it vanished right away as soon as it entered. What could be the reason? Was martial arts something that couldn't be self-taught after all? Mok Jayangan glanced at Guard Gochan, who was lying on the bed next to him as if he were dead. He had lost his left ring finger and little finger and had fainted after undergoing a torture called severing tendons and breaking bones. Mok Jayangan had asked the outer hall warriors to bring him here. He was thinking of just letting him sleep, but he decided to wake him up. Guard Gochan. Guard Gochan. Swish! Mok Jayangan raised his palm above Gochan's face. Then, slap! Gochan opened his eyes wide, quickly sat up, and answered hurriedly. Yes. Wow. That's amazing. Weren't you sleeping? I was sleeping. In fact, Gochan had woken up about an hour ago. After waking up, he had been keeping his eyes closed and assessing the situation, unsure of what was going on. Thanks to that, he learned that this place was the medical hall and that Mok Jayangan was right next to him. That was why he couldn't bring himself to open his eyes. It was a kind of escapism from reality. To him, Mok Jayangan whispered, I had something I wanted to tell you when you woke up. What is it? Gulp. Gochan couldn't hide his nervousness. He felt uneasy for no reason. Mok Jayangan chuckled and said to him, Contrary to my expectations, you're quite tight-lipped. Phew. Gochan let out a sigh of relief. In fact, he thought it wouldn't make much difference whether he died this way or that way, but he endured it because dying at Mok Jayangan's hands seemed like it would be the worst agony. I'm starting to like you more and more, Guard Gochan. Thank you. Fortunately. It seemed that his choice was not wrong. Wait a minute. Is this something to be happy about? He felt like he was being tamed by Mok Jayangan. Realizing that, Gochan fell into a sense of self-disgust. Then, as if remembering something, he looked apologetic and apologized. By the way, young master. I'm sorry. I was caught by Guard Gam on the way and had the item you entrusted me with taken away. I got that back. What? What did he mean by getting it back? Mok Jiangnan smiled at the puzzled Go-chan and whispered. Only you know this, guard Go-chan. I killed guard Gam and took it back. At Mok Jiangnan's words, Go-chan's eyes widened. Did he hear that correctly? He killed Kem Hyang? The middle-ranked assassin of the Flying Daggers sect, one of the 3 major assassin groups in the Central Plains, despite being retired? How? Shoo. Mok Jiangnan gestured with his eyes towards the entrance of the medical hall. Outside the door screen, there were shadows of about 4 warriors. On the opposite side, there were also 4 guards. They were the warriors of the outer hall of the Yun Mok Sword Manor. They think Guard Gam attacked me and disappeared. So, Guard Go-chan, you should roughly know that as well. At Mok Jiangnan's words, Go-chan lowered his voice and whispered. Is it true? Is there any reason for me to lie about this? Go-chan swallowed his dry saliva. Indeed, this devilish fellow wouldn't make false claims about such matters. Unbelievable. What the hell is this guy? He clearly hadn't learned martial arts. Yet now, he even claimed to have killed a first-rate master? It was something that couldn't possibly happen under common sense. No, is this even possible? To guard Go-chan, who couldn't easily believe it, Mok Jiangnan said, I have something to ask you. Why yes? What is it? I want to open a danjian, but it's not going well. I thought I had a pretty good understanding, but it seems I can't quite grasp the contents of the secret manual. Are you talking about the danjian? Go-chan asked back with a furrowed brow. Did this guy still want to learn martial arts? However, Mok Jiangnan's age wasn't exactly young to start martial arts. 17. With waste accumulated in the blood vessels, it would be difficult to properly absorb energy even with breathing techniques. That was why it was best to start breathing techniques as young as possible. Putting aside the issue of comprehension, it would naturally be difficult to form a danjian. Go-chan was at a loss for how to explain this. Sorry for being blunt, but you're already too late to learn martial arts. He couldn't bring himself to say that. After pondering for a moment, Go-chan said, See, could you tell me what aspects are difficult for you? Let's help him for now. Explaining it verbally would only upset him anyway. It would be better to let him experience it himself and realize that he was too late to learn martial arts. Unaware of his thoughts, Mok Jiangnan shared the points where he was stuck. So, no matter how much I try, the energy disperses. At Mok Jiangnan's words, Go-chan was momentarily stunned. Did he hear it wrong? He had just started practicing breathing techniques, yet he claimed to have understood what qi was and even gathered it near the danjian below his navel by himself through the qi circulation path? Of course, it dispersed, but still? No way. He must be joking, right? A guy who knew nothing about martial arts, no matter how much he had a secret manual, did it by himself to that extent? This was something impossible no matter how he thought about it. Even with the most basic 3 talents method, it was difficult to easily understand the definition of qi without learning the basics for practicing martial arts. Guard Go-chan? Why yes. Why are you making that expression? That's. Is there something strange? No. Rather than that. Rather than? Young master. Did you really feel the qi through breathing? In just half a day, he felt it? Yes. Why? Young master. This is a part that really needs to be clarified. I'm telling you I felt it, not joking around. Is there any reason to fool around? This is driving me crazy. From Go-chan's perspective, it was exactly like this. Mok Jiangnan was saying with his own mouth that he was a once-in-a-millennium genius. Chapter 27. Death Qi. Part 3. The guard Go-chan stared intently at Mok Jiangnan and soon steadied his breathing. Everything this fellow said sounded like a lie. It was impossible for someone who didn't even know the precise definition of martial arts, internal energy, to read a secret manual alone and feel qi through self-study in less than half a day. Well, perhaps it was possible. But it would require a talent for martial arts that could be called a once-in-a-millennium prodigy. Even those born with a keen sense of qi find the beginning difficult. Yet Mok Jiangun claimed to have done it. Although he honestly found it unbelievable, there was no reason for this devilish fellow to lie about such a thing. Then it was a simple matter. He just needed to verify it. Whether it was true or not. Young master, may this subordinate directly confirm it? How so? Since you said you absorbed qi through the breathing technique, you can just do that. I will check if you are circulating qi during the process. I suppose that's possible. Verifying to that extent is not a difficult task. I see. Then I'll leave it to you. Understood. Mok Jiangun sat cross-legged on the bed. Well, this part wasn't too difficult, so nothing could go wrong. Mok Jiangun, having taken this posture, closed his eyes and slowly breathed. Who? Go-chan closely observed this. Then he stepped down from the bed and approached Mok Jiangun. And then? This is to check, so don't mind it and just keep focusing on the breathing technique. With those words, he brought his 2 fingers together and placed them on one of the acupoints on Mok Jiangun's neck. Even a faint qi could be felt if it was being circulated through the breathing technique. He didn't have high expectations, but just in case. Go-chan furrowed his brows. What was this? Surely it couldn't be. However, qi was truly flowing through the meridians. This meant that he was properly detecting and absorbing qi. Go-chan was utterly astonished. Even for 3 to 4-year-olds, known to have the most sensitive qi sense, detecting qi in less than half a day was truly a difficult feat. No matter how outstanding, a fortnight was the norm, and without luck, it could take months. Yet Mok Jiangun's meridians had considerable impurities and his qi sense should be diminished at this age, but he felt qi in just a day. Does this fellow really have martial talent? Go-chan's gaze changed. Until just now, he had been doubtful, but now he thought it might be possible. There are no absolutes in all matters. Exceptions do exist. Mok Jiangun could be such an existence. Let's examine it. Since he said the qi was dissipating, directly checking was the only way to find the cause. Go-chan quietly spoke to Mok Jiangun. I will infuse internal energy to examine it once. Please endure even if it's uncomfortable. As he was in the midst of practicing the breathing technique, Mok Jiangun nodded his head very slightly. Shoo. Go-chan focused and infused true qi into Mok Jiangun's gimen, liver, acupoint. He guided the true qi through the Yongmun, liver, and Yongwan, ren, acupoints to the lower Danjian area to trace Mok Jiangun's circulation path. In that process, Go-chan couldn't help but be surprised again. What's with this fellow? Impurities don't accumulate in the meridians only if one practices the breathing technique from a young age. But right now, there were barely any impurities in Mok Jiangun's meridians. It was like looking at a 3 or 4-year-old child. How can this be? He definitely wouldn't have cultivated internal energy before, right? It was truly a bizarre phenomenon. For the meridians to be this clean at this age without practicing the breathing technique, one would have to receive clearing the passage point for a long time from a profound internal expert. Otherwise, it was impossible. Go-chan looked at the back of Mok Jiangun's head with a puzzled expression. Didn't he say he lived with his grandfather in the mountains? What was this about? Go-chan, who had been filled with doubts, shook his head and for now, sent true qi to the area around the lower Danjian. It was almost there. For now, there was one speculation. The reason it's dissipating is probably because he just started absorbing qi. Usually, that was the case. At most, it hadn't even been half a day since Mok Jiangun started practicing the breathing technique. No matter how much qi he gathered, the amount would be too small, and since he hadn't properly formed the lower Danjian, it was likely to dissipate. Startled. In an instant, Go-chan got goosebumps. He felt something cold and spine-chilling. However. He hadn't removed his palm, but the true chi that had been connected was cut off. What was this phenomenon? Go-chan, who was furrowing his brows, once again infused true chi into the liver, gimen, acupoint out of curiosity. And again, he sent it to the area around the lower danjian. However, startled. Once more, along with that bizarre sensation, the true chi he sent was cut off. No, to be precise, it dissipated. Go-chan was momentarily dumbfounded. What? It was hard to understand this phenomenon. It wasn't the chi that Mok Jaeyoung himself had absorbed, but his own true chi. Yet the moment it reached the area around the lower danjian, he lost control over it and it dissipated and vanished. Why was this happening? Unless one directly cut off the true chi, this shouldn't be possible. As he struggled to understand, Mok Jaeyoung's voice was heard. Sir Go-chan's chi also dissipated? You felt that too? Yes. This is unbelievable. This fellow's chi sense is truly unparalleled. At this point, it could only be seen as an innate instinct. To be able to perceive another person's chi when he had just started absorbing chi himself. It was tongue-twisting. If this fellow had learned martial arts from a young age, how would it have been? He might have had talent on par with the youngest young master. The youngest son of the Yun Mok Sword Manor, Mok Yu Cheon. His talent was so overwhelming that it might appear only once in 3 generations of the Yun Mok Sword Manor. A monster who reached the realm of a first-class master at the age of 14 and reached the beginning of the peak stage just 2 years later at 16. It was truly a dominating talent. But it seemed that if this fellow had also started early, he might have approached that level. However, there was one problem. Why is it dissipating? He had tried sending it once more just now. But the result was the same. If the faint chi he had gathered through the breathing technique dissipated, the reason would be obvious, but for this, he couldn't figure out the cause at all. Young master. Do you know why? I am ashamed to say that with this subordinate skill, it is difficult to know the reason. His pride was hurt, but Go-chan was merely a second-rate expert. Martial artists referred to those at the first-rate stage and above as masters. That's how second-rate experts, while stronger than ordinary people, couldn't be said to have reached the realm of masters or grandmasters. Unless an expert of a higher level than this subordinate examines it, it seems it will be hard to know. But since you've trained in martial arts, don't you have any speculations? I don't know. I feel some unusual chi around the young master's lower danjian, but it's hard to discern what it is. It was completely different from internal energy. It was so cold and unpleasant that Go-chan wasn't even sure if it should be called chi. To Go-chan, who was like this, Mok Jaeyoung asked in a low voice. Then, I won't beat around the bush and ask directly. If it continues like this, will I be unable to form a danjian? A straightforward question. At this, Go-chan replied with difficulty. To be honest, that's right. If the chi gathered through the breathing technique keeps dissipating, you won't be able to form a danjian. In the end, that becomes the problem. Pardon? No. Just talking to myself. With those words, Mok Jaeyoung stroked his chin. While Go-chan couldn't pinpoint it exactly, the cause seemed to have become clear. The death chi near the lower danjian seemed to be the cause. What to do about this? The chi absorbed through the breathing technique doesn't match with this and dissipates. And with this breathing technique or circulation method, the death chi couldn't be moved. No solution came to mind for this method. This is troublesome. The original purpose was to learn martial arts. That monstrous man he had met back then. When he tried to revive that sensation, he still didn't dare to think of defeating that man. No, he didn't even dare to confront him. Am I unable to learn martial arts? If that was the case, there was no reason to stay here. Mok Jaeyoung's mind became complicated for a moment. It was still too early to definitely feel discouraged. As Go-chan said, he was merely a second-rate expert, so he might not have been able to grasp the exact cause. Would getting help from a proper master be the answer? As he was pondering, Oh my, how peculiar. Seeing how it dissipates the true qi, it seems completely opposite to the qi generated through normal circulation. Opposite? At Mok Jiang'un's question, Go Chan waved his hands and said, It's just my guess. You don't need to take it too seriously. Opposite, opposite. Mok Jiang'un furrowed his brows and became lost in thought. The moment he heard the word opposite, he recalled having a similar feeling when he first absorbed this cold and death qi. If the qi absorbed through breathing is considered life qi, in other words, living qi, then this is literally death qi. Then perhaps the method was wrong from the beginning? Mok Jiang'un reached his own conclusion and said, Sir Go Chan's words are correct. I should try reversing the qi circulation method and breathing technique. With those words, Mok Jiang'un closed his eyes. It was to directly attempt what he had realized. What? For a moment, Go Chan couldn't hide his bewilderment. Did he just say he would reverse the qi circulation method and breathing technique? For an instant, he doubted his own ears. The breathing technique was originally a type of cultivation method derived from Taoism that boosted life qi and yang qi. But reversing it meant literally accepting death and yin qi. Moreover, reversing the qi circulation was called the Great Method of Reverse Meridians, leading oneself to fall into the demonic path. Yo, young master! Stop. You may fall into a qi deviation. Fire entering the devil, 1. This was a phenomenon that occurred even if the qi inside the body was slightly distorted. But if it was like this with just a slight distortion, completely reversing the qi circulation direction was no different from choosing self-destruction. Phew. Watching this scene, the corners of Chang Ryang's mouth curled up. That foolish fellow was doing something stupid with shallow knowledge. How can he think of such a thing? Even the reverse meridian method developed by the main sect after long research often led to the destruction of the Danjian or severe side effects that turned people into cripples or corpses. Yet a greenhorn who hadn't even formed a Danjian was reversing the qi circulation on his own. It was literally a suicidal act. If it goes well, I may find freedom. Chang Ryang smirked and said to the demonic monk, if harm was inflicted from the outside or the devouring god tried to cause harm, it would eventually return as retribution. But if one took their own life, it was a different story. If that happened, they too might be freed from the shackles. Don't interfere, mortal. Swish. Chang Ryang lightly swung her pipe. Then, Go Chan, who was trying to stop Mok Jiang'un, was pushed back by an invisible force and laid down on the bed he had been lying on, stuck to it. Ack. This is? The startled Go Chan tried to gather internal energy to sit up. But he couldn't move an inch. Yo, young Moss, MMPH. Shoo. You need to be quiet. With a single gesture from Chang Ryang, Go Chan couldn't even move his lips. In the meantime, Mok Jiang'un was already reversing the breathing technique and qi circulation. Seeing this, Chang Ryang's red lips twitched. If you die on your own, I'll personally dismember your soul. She was truly looking forward to it. However, swoosh. White breath flowed out from Mok Jiang'un, who was circulating qi. That breath was not warm energy but extremely cold and yin. Until just now, Chang Ryang had thought that Mok Jiang'un would fall into a devilish state and die from recklessly reversing the qi circulation. But as things flowed in an unexpected direction, one of her eyebrows raised involuntarily. What is this? She had never seen such a sight before, even when she was alive. Why were yin qi gathering around him as he reversed the qi circulation? It was clearly visible to Chang Ryang's ghost eyes. In the world, not only life qi and yang qi were spread. Naturally, as yin and yang energies maintained balance, death qi and yin qi were also evenly distributed in corresponding amounts. But there was an important fact here. It was that living beings could neither sense nor feel these opposite energies. Yet what was happening? How? How was Mok Jiang'un, a living being, attracting death qi? It was something she couldn't understand at all. Chapter 28. Death Qi. Part 4. Inside Haiwa Hall, the residence of Lady Suk. Lady Suk sat with her chin resting elegantly on her clasped hands, looking at a woman with doubtful eyes. The woman had a truly peculiar aura about her. At most, she looked to be 22 or 23 years old, quite young. However, perhaps because one of her eyes was white, she exuded a somewhat heavy and unapproachable atmosphere. If not for that unpleasant white eye, she would have quite enchanted many men. The white eye was considerably irritating. The guard Hoang beside her seemed to have a similar feeling, as she was slightly furrowing her brows. That's how unusual it was. But what was that on her shoulder? She had a bird platform made by weaving cowhide and oak branches. Usually, such a thing was made for trained carrier pigeons or falcons to perch on with their talons. But she had no bird. No, not even the scent of one. As she was finding it strange, the woman pretended to stroke the empty platform with her hand and muttered to herself, "It's all right. We'll be leaving soon." Seeing her like that, Lady Suk clicked her tongue inwardly. It's hard to find a proper person among the diviners. Why did she find this one even less trustworthy than the diviner Myosin who came last time? She had informed them of the news of Myosin's death, so she thought the ghostly spirit pavilion, the group of diviner and Mengqing, would send someone more skilled, but she was quite displeased. However, without showing it, she spoke. "You said your name was Sak?" "Yes. If you don't mind me asking, may I inquire about your age? You look younger than you appear." "Age is not important." "All right. I suppose you can't reveal it." "I'm 19. "Pardon?" She was even younger than expected. Not even in her prime. The guard Hoang, having learned that Sak was young, carefully interjected. "Shall we request Ghostly Spirit Pavilion again?" At her words, Sak silently rose from her seat. Then she stretched out her hand and spoke. Guard Hoang frowned and asked, "What's with that hand? You'll provide the travel expenses, right? What have you done to deserve travel expenses? It wasn't us who broke the agreement, but your side. It's not a breach of contract. Since it's a replacement of the dispatched diviner, I'm only requesting the travel expenses, excluding the penalty." It wasn't just her aura that was irritating. Lady Suk snorted as if dumbfounded and spoke. "My family has had a connection with Ghostly Spirit Pavilion since my maiden days and maintained a good relationship, but this matter is hard to accept. For such a serious case where the diviner you sent died a strange death, you send a young friend who's not even in her prime. Diviner Myosin is my teacher." "Pardon?" At Sak's words, Lady Suk furrowed her brows. Looking at Myosin, he seemed to be a middle-aged man who had honed his divine arts for many years. But this woman named Sak was merely 19. Yet she says diviner Myosin is her teacher? As she found it strange, Sak spoke. A diviner receives 6 levels of titles according to their skill. From top to bottom, it's Shin, Illinois, Wool, Gi, Myo, Su. My teacher Myosin is at the lowest level, Su, having just completed 5 years. The lowest level? As far as Lady Suk knew, diviner Myosin was quite renowned in Mengqing. But he was a diviner of the lowest level? Then what about you? I am at Gi. It was the 4th out of the 6 titles and 2 levels higher than Myosin. At Sak's words, Lady Suk looked at her for a moment. Her appearance still seemed young, and her strangely brazen and arrogant attitude was irritating, but if this was true, she wouldn't be worse than Myosin, even if not better. "Madam, I will go again." Swish. Lady Suk raised her hand, cutting off Guard Hoang's words, and spoke. "All right. I will entrust you with the task." "Madam?" Since this diviner is said to be skilled, let's see. For now, she decided to entrust it to her. If it failed, the silver would freeze just like with Myosin. And she would have grounds to protest at the Ghostly Spirit Pavilion. Lady Suk rose from her seat. "I have something to show you, so follow me." With those words, she went outside and guided them to a place like a warehouse located behind Haiwa Hall. Entering there was another door, and a waiting servant opened it and lit a lantern. Flicker. As they entered, Lady Sook covered her nose with her sleeve. It was because of a terrible stench. Lady Sook pointed to a corpse covered with a straw mat, leaving only the feet exposed. This is Diviner Myo's corpse. The identity of that corpse was none other than the deceased Myo Sin. It was made to look as if it had been burned, but it was hidden to show to another diviner. Step. Sak approached the corpse of the dead Myo Sin. And she removed the straw mat. Teacher. Sak stared intently at the face of the dead Myo Sin with trembling eyes. Although there was said to be no great affection between diviner, the death of someone she knew was still unpleasant. Lady Sook asked her, "How do you think he died?" A straightforward question. To this question, Sak replied in a low voice. The cause of death is not judged by what is seen. Only the dead can tell. Swish. Then she brought her hand to the face of the dead Myo Sin. Seeing this, Lady Sook and Guard Hoang frowned and slightly turned their heads. They couldn't imagine touching a foul-smelling corpse with their bare hands. Sak touched Myo Sin's face with her eyes closed. And then, clench. With her left hand, she made hand seals. Guy. 2. John. The Beck, jaw, followed by the Byong. Sak, who had made the hand seals of the 9-character Therni, chanted something in a small voice. 3-person joint technique. The Northern Emperor has granted me authority. So reveal all that you have experienced. Urgently, as the law and decree command. The atmosphere was getting eerie. The air seemed to grow heavy. What is she doing? Both Lady Sook and Guard Hoang held their breath and watched her. Soon, a bizarre scene unfolded before their eyes. Tremble. The entire body of the dead Myo Sin began to shake on its own. The corpse is moving by itself? Guard Hoang was so startled that he covered his mouth and unknowingly took a step back. On the other hand, Lady Sook only furrowed her brows at this sight, not greatly frightened. Rather, she focused on how the Feng arts were being performed, as she couldn't see it up close. Reveal all. Urgently, as the law. Clench. Sak bit her lip tightly, and her expression instantly distorted. As expected. It didn't deviate from her expectations. As Sak pulled her left hand, which was maintaining the hand seal, the dead Myo Sin's mouth opened with a creak and closed. After that, the movement subsided. Sak opened her eyes slightly and released the hand seal on her left hand. What happened? To that question, Sak said nothing. But soon she opened her eyes, removed her hand, and spoke. I asked my teacher. Asked? As if a dead person would really answer. Of course not. Unless the spiritual remains in the corporeal part of the soul, they won't directly answer. Was she making a joke now? Didn't she clearly say she asked? As if reading her thoughts, Sak continued, all the dead have traces. Traces? In the spirit of a corpse that hasn't been dead for 49 days, spiritual traces remain. If you awaken those traces, you can see how the owner of the soul met their death. Then did you see who did it? I didn't see. What do you mean? You just said a moment ago that within 49 days. If one loses their life by murder, only a fragment of the last moment remains. So no matter how skilled a diviner is, it's difficult to accurately confirm how they died. Fear. The last fragment of diviner Myo Sin that she saw was extreme fear. That's why she had bitten her lip tightly. This in itself wasn't particularly special. But would a person living as a diviner have been this terrified just from being killed? Of course, if it was a vengeful spirit of the yellow spirit level, it might have been difficult to handle with just the title of Su-rank diviner, so it was quite possible. Lady Sook asked. Then you're saying we can't know anything? That's not the case. What do you mean? Dying by Sal means it was a death by supernatural phenomena. Seeing how the blood vessels of the corpse are so grotesquely protruding, it's not an ordinary vengeful spirit. At those words, Lady Sook's eyes sharpened. This was the very point she had doubts about. So you're saying it's true that he died like this because of supernatural phenomena? Yes. It's a very strong vengeful spirit. I knew it. That child did it after all. Ah. The desired answer came out. Then it meant that Mok Jayangun used supernatural phenomena to kill Diviner Myosin and even threatened the life of Sowa, her maid. As everything became clear, she trembled with rage. What kind of bastard was he that even such vengeful spirits were helping him? Lady Sook spoke sharply with a voice filled with anger. You can handle it, right? To her question, Sak asked back. If you promise one thing clearly, it's possible. What is it? Not all supernatural phenomena are the same. Vengeful spirits are the opposite of cultivating life, so they can't be tamed as devouring gods in the first place. So in the end, we have to consider it as possession. And? If what was mentioned in the request is true, that young master named Mok Jayangun may have already lost his corporeal part of the soul to supernatural phenomena and lost his spirit. Taking this into account, during the exorcism, Lady Sook cut off the complicated explanation, just get to the point. There is a high probability of death. Is that all right? At Sak's words, the corners of Lady Sook's mouth curled up slightly. Rather, it was what she wished for. I don't mind. Seeing her like that, Sak sneered inwardly. It was truly ridiculous to see a family coveting each other's lives for the sake of the succession competition. But it wasn't something for her to concern herself with. She took out a wooden dagger from the waist belt made of leather. What are you trying to do? First, I'll return the sal to weaken the vengeful spirit and the host. How? Receiving a reverse sal is an excruciating pain that makes one wish for death. Watch. Swish. Sak took out a talisman from her bosom. On the talisman, it was written in red ink. Reverse. She wrapped it around the wooden dagger and then unhesitatingly stabbed it into the chest of the dead Diviner Myosin. Stab. The Northern Emperor grants me the talisman to drive away evil spirits, so urgently act according to the command. Wriggle. At that moment, the corpse of the dead Diviner Myosin twisted. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Phew. Damn bastard. Smoke flowed from Chang Ryang's red lips. She glared at Mok Jayangun, who was circulating qi, with a displeased expression. What the hell was that fellow's identity? If one reversed the qi circulation, it was normal to fall into qi deviation, become a cripple, or face death. But the death qi was gathering. Those who could be affected by or sense death qi were the dead, in other words, vengeful spirits like themselves. But Mok Jayangun was a living human. Was this possible? A living human attracts the qi of death. It was an unprecedented sight. But she still didn't know. Since it was an unknown realm that living humans hadn't explored yet, even if he gathered death qi, it was hard to guarantee that he could circulate and control it like the qi of cultivating life. Controlling the qi of death was no different from entering the realm of the dead. Phew. Curiosity filled her crimson eyes as she exhaled thick smoke. Could a living human really gather and even control the qi of death? This was quite interesting and greatly stimulating. However, smolder, smolder. One of Chang Ryang's eyebrows, who had been looking at Mok Jayangun, raised. This is? Chang Ryang stared in the northeast direction. Then, demonic monk also flinched and looked northeast, and soon stood as if guarding Mok Jayangun's breathing technique that was gathering death qi. Tension filled demonic monk's eyes. At that moment, thud. Demonic monk clutched his chest and was pushed back. Whoosh. As if receiving immense pressure, demonic monk crossed his arms and distorted his expression. Crack, 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 crack. Wounds like something appeared all over demonic monk's giant body. Even his blood vessels grotesquely protruded. Then, the eyelids of Mok Jayangun, who was concentrating on the reverse qi circulation with his eyes closed, trembled. At this rate, he would be hit by Sal. Seeing this, Chong Ryang's crimson eyes deepened. How dare a lowly bastard? Russell. Chong Ryang, who was on the ceiling, lightly descended as if flapping her wings. Then, swinging her pipe toward where the reverse Sal was flying, she parted her red lips. Begone. Swoosh. As soon as those words ended, the gray smoke flowing from demonic monk's wounds gathered into one and rushed toward the northeast direction. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Stab. 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 Sack, who had made a hand seal with her left hand, was repeatedly stabbing the corpse with the wooden dagger wrapped in a talisman. Lady Suk felt a strange thrill at Sack's appearance, trembling her body. Thinking that this would make that devilish fellow Mok Jiangun suffer, her excitement wouldn't subside. More. Suffer more. Stab. Stab. Stabbing the corpse relieved her anger. Sack, who had been stabbing the body recklessly, now raised the dagger to pierce the dead Myosin's brow. At that very moment. Whoosh! Sack's body was flung backward and soon crashed into the warehouse wall. Bang! Ugh! Sack, who had hit the wall, dropped the dagger with a groan. She looked at her palm that had dropped the dagger, and it was swollen in the shape of the dagger as if she had suffered a burn. Drip, drip. Then, black blood flowed from her mouth. Diviner Sack. The startled Lady Suk supported her. It was hard to understand what was suddenly happening. Why is this happening? To her question, Sack couldn't give any answer. It was because the shock she had suddenly received was so great that she was experiencing the pain of her internal organs twisting. Reverse Sal, to strike back with Reverse Sal. Sack's heterochromatic eyes trembled. This was a completely unexpected situation. In the middle of it, something so evil and powerful that it gave her goosebumps had intervened. It's not just yellow spirit level. It was a vengeful spirit of an even higher class.